Nova Scotians are pretty split. There are other polls that have been commissioned by NoFrac and by the Council of Canadians, which show even higher percentages. But 69%. And I would encourage people to look at that poll, to look at the question that was asked, and understand what that poll means. It's an important poll, but you have to interpret the poll through the question that was asked. What we also know, however, is that this is an independent poll done
by an independent corporation, right?
By CRA, which does a quarterly poll of all kinds of issues affecting Atlantic Canada, and in that poll of polls, they included questions on hydraulic fracturing, and this is the statistic they came up with. But that's some time ago. That was in early 2013. And whether you believe it's 53% versus 39% or 69% versus whatever, you can say that Nova Scotians are divided on this issue. We're of course taking an evidence-based approach. What that doesn't mean, however, is there is sufficient evidence on every aspect of hydraulic fracturing. So obviously we pay great attention to peer-reviewed studies, to government reports, to reports that have academic standing. But we also know that the rapid expansion of this industry globally has been so recent, that we simply do not have sufficient information in the peer-reviewed literature to make judgments about all risks, their likelihood, or indeed their severity. So, on to the conclusions. Let's get to the chase here. There are a number of things where we simply have to conclude that the jury is out. No matter how much research we were able to do, how much data we were able to pull out of the province or other agencies, there are still some very, very significant unknowns. So one of those is the proven size of the resource. So we can model the possible size of the resource based on what geologists call analogues. So if this is what it looks like in New Brunswick, this is what it might look like in Nova Scotia. But that's hypothetical. Until you do exploration and you do seismic testing, you do not know. So we do not know what is the proven size of the resource in Nova Scotia, although we can share with you some hypothetical estimates and some scenarios. We do not know if industry will even be interested to come and develop whatever resource there may or may not be there. The way the oil and gas industry works is that they work as any capital-intensive industry works. They invest where their costs are lowest, the hassle is lowest, and the payoff is greatest. We are simply unaware whether or not there would be significant industry interest at this point. We also do not know, because this would be a very major study to conduct, what would be the specific life cycle impacts of hydraulic fracturing in Nova Scotia compared to other fossil fuels or other forms of energy that we might employ, including renewables. Hopefully some people in the room are aware that I've done a bit of work on renewables, and that is an important thing to me too.
About solar freaking energy!
So just to pick up the story, it would be a significant piece of technical research to do the life cycle impacts of unconventional gas versus the other parts of the energy mix in our province, although there is evidence from various academic studies, and some of this is contested, what are the potential comparative impacts of shale gas versus coal and so on. We do not know whether there will be community support for this activity. We do not know, and I'll come to that in a little while. We do not know how risks and benefits would be apportioned, and we certainly do not know how longer-term impacts, including climate change impacts, would be. In terms of what we do know something about the different pathways of potential pollution from this industry.
Enough.
And we do know that we can describe many of those risks and the severity of those risks in qualitative terms, i.e. very significant, highly significant or insignificant, and in some cases semi-quantitative terms. And one of the exercises the panel has been through is trying to estimate the likely frequency of a negative event and then the likely severity. Because if something is infrequent but catastrophic, that's bad. If it's very frequent and not catastrophic, it's a different calculation. We do know quite a bit about the global research needs. The Council of Canadian Academies produced a report a couple of months back. It's been enormously helpful to our own research, and that pointed out a lot of the gaps in knowledge, a lot of the gaps in research around this technology, and so that is relatively well known. And we can identify, as I just mentioned, some specific pieces of research that would need to be done in Nova Scotia before anyone contemplated proceeding with hydraulic fracking. We know there are regulatory frameworks out there, and we know there are ways to reduce risk. But of course, reducing risk is not eliminating risk. And this is the challenge, that nothing in life is risk-free. And life, therefore, is about choosing risks and choosing benefits. Just to be clear, the panel is not saying that this activity should proceed now in our province, nor are we saying that it should necessarily proceed in the future. We simply do not know it's a good idea. We do believe there is a need for two pieces of foundational research, and I'm happy to talk about these in detail. One would be research looking into how communities respond to issues of risk and benefits. And secondly, what I already mentioned, the importance of modelling the real impacts. It's one thing taking studies from the US or from other parts of the world. They may or may not have any relevance to the specific geology, the specific environment, the specific socio-economic situation of Nova Scotia. So that would have to be done. And then we're also saying, we have to keep an open mind. We live in a world where economic, social, and environmental issues collide all of the time, and we have to be smart as a society. We have to keep an open mind, and I think that is important. At that point, those are the main takeaways from this evening, and I guess the main takeaways from our report. At that point, we also have to play with the what if, right? So what if it emerged in 5 or 10 or 15 years' time that this could be done safely to the satisfaction of communities and the life cycle impacts were better than coal, and there might be an argument to make for going to natural gas as a transitional fuel rather than coal. What if? So we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't explore that. So we have said that in this industry there are two steps. There's exploration and there is development. And I'm very happy to explain and show slides of what development looks like. But these are two separate and distinct steps with different economic, social and environmental implications. However, we are saying that both steps should be only taken if a community, theoretical if, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, if a community welcomed the development. And the reason this is important, what is becoming, if you like, a bit of a shorthand story for our panel, this is the principle of community permission to proceed. And that links directly to the precautionary approach. The reasoning here is that you could take a continental view of this issue and do the math and say, well, it's better or less good or whatever for climate change. You could do a provincial view of the costs, the benefits and the risks. But what really matters in terms of the precautionary approach is that we assess that at the level of the community. Many people have commented in the last few days and indeed throughout our process, that we've been very good at nailing down the potential direct economic impacts, and that's because there are formulae. We know if you put in 100 wells in 10 pads, how many people are going to be employed, how many cups of Tim Hortons coffee are like to be bought at the local Tim Hortons. We can model that because it's been done a lot. What is impossible to model, unfortunately, although we can list all the potential costs, is what might be the costs in terms of health, in terms of water resource management, monitoring, all those other things that a community would want to see assessed before anything went forwards. So it's a bit of an unequal story, this, because we can model the direct impacts, and we've got numbers there. We can even model the royalties, although that's highly speculative. It's impossible for us to model the risk-benefit equation unless we know where exactly it's happening, what communities it's affecting, what road systems would it be using, what air would the people be breathing. That's why we are saying that a core principle in our recommendations is this notion of community permission to proceed. And we are saying that that ties in directly to our interpretation of a precautionary approach, and whichever way you look at it actually, whether you look at it from the perspective of the community, whether you look at it from the perspective of the government, or even industry, if a community does not want this thing, having looked at all the evidence and having seen what the potential economic impacts might be, seeing what potential costs may be, if a community does not want this, then that's where the precautionary approach kicks in. If we ever get that far, again this is a hypothetical, we're also saying, a lot of Frank's work and indeed Graham's work has reinforced this. If an industry like this ever developed in our province, big, then we're saying there's other levels, there's other mechanisms that would need to be brought into play to ensure that the risks really were minimal and really were regulatable and really capable of being enforced. And without that, without we have the modelling of the water resources, the monitoring of health, the monitoring of environmental factors, without the fact we have rigorous health impact assessments, rigorous environmental impact assessments, and specific risk reduction systems. Without that, I don't think anyone would recommend that a community proceed. So that, in a nutshell, is what we are moving towards recommending. We do believe that the twin principles of a significant period of learning and some foundational research and some clearly defined protections for communities are the way to say to our province that this would be a robust way to address the issue of hydraulic fracturing.